Hello everyone and welcome to the Kiki London YouTube channel. My name's Amanda and in today's video we are going to be doing some Dreamy cloud nails. Last week I did this design and I was just having a little play around really, so I didn't do a video, but I had a couple of people ask me if I did have a video on it, so I thought it would be a great opportunity to do one. But I have done the design today slightly different because I wanted to include some vertical ombres. Now on all of the tips that I'm working on, I have already applied a layer of the rubber base coat and cured that for 30 seconds so that we're able to jump straight into doing the design. Now, as I said, we're going to be doing some ombres. So the first two colours I'm going to be using are Spring Fling and Just Lavish. These two colours are absolutely beautiful. And of course, I'm going to be using the Kiki London Ombre brush to ombre these two colours together. Both of these colours are really highly pigmented and have that creamy texture to them. So I'm coming in with a really thin first coat of colour for that first layer of the ombre. Now I only do 2 layers of the ombre, but if you wanted to perfect it, you could come in with a third coat. Just play around and see what works best for you. But as you see, I've painted both those colours vertically down the nail, and then I'm simply going to take my ombre brush and start blending them together. Now to do the vertical ombre, I focused on the very centre of the nail to begin with, just to get rid of that harsh line and get that blended in a little bit. I'm not too worried about creating a perfect ombre or a perfect fade on this first coat of colour. I'm just taking the colour and blending it with the ombre brush just so there's not that harsh line there, like I said. Once I've got rid of the harsh line down the centre, I'm taking the pink over to the lilac and then the lilac over to the pink. I then pop that in to cure for 30 seconds and we're going to come in and do the second coat. Now for the second coat, I'm applying the layer of colour quite thin again, just in case I wanted to come in with a third coat because I wasn't too sure how happy I was going to be with the ombre or how easy it was going to be. I do end up only doing 2 coats though because I was quite pleased with how the ombre looked, and the ombres are going to be the background for some nail art, so they didn't have to be too perfect, but I found they blended together quite nicely. So again, whilst we've got that wet gel polish down, I'm just going to run my ombre brush up and down the nail to blend the colours together. Again, I'm starting right down the middle of the nail to blend the harsh line away, and then I'm going to come over the pink a little bit more and pull that into the lilac, and then I'm going to come over the lilac and pull that into the pink, and I basically just keep going up and down using really light feathery strokes until I'm happy with how well the colours look together. Now I did find that because the pink is from one colour group and lilac is in another colour group, they was a little bit more trickier to blend together than using 2 colours that are in the same colour group. I do always find that 2 pinks will blend together a lot easier than say a pink and a purple like we're doing here, but because both of these colours have that creamy consistency, they did blend quite well. I just was taking my time to make sure I was happy with how they looked basically. Now at this point, don't worry too much if you feel as though you're creating a lot of brush strokes with your brush, because what I like to do is once I've perfected my ombre, I just set the nail aside for a minute or 2 before curing, and this kind of just helps those brush marks melt away and the gel polish to self-level out. You can see as well, I'm wiping my brush on a dry lint-free pad. This is just to take off any excess gel polish, because when you are creating the ombre, you might pick up quite a lot of the pink gel polish and then you need to move over to the lilac. So I'm just wiping off any of the excess so that I create a nicer blend. Now on the next nail, we're going to start off with the Just Lavish, but I'm going to ombre that with Mojito Ice. I absolutely love this colour. It is gorgeous. You will see towards the end of the set when I show you all the nails together, I kind of wanted the colours to go across the nail, so ombre across. So the lilac was on the right side on the previous nail, so then it transfers over to the left side, and I kind of carry on that pattern throughout the design. A little bit tricky to explain, but you'll see what I mean further along in the video. Now I'm going to be doing vertical ombres on 3 of the nails. So I've just sped through the process just to show you guys it, but I didn't want the video to be really repetitive because I'm doing the exact same for the bases on 3 nails. And I did find that certain colours are blended together a lot easier than others. The Just Lavish and the Mojito Ice, they blended together really easily. There were 2 colours that went really well together as well. Now here again, I'm coming in and applying that second coat of colour. And I just wanted to point out, obviously you're popping your gel polish colours down wet right next to each other. So it is possible that you're going to pick up the first colour that you used on your second colour's brush. So always make sure that you check your brush before you pop it back in your bottle of gel polish, because for example there on the Mojito Ice brush, I'd picked up some of the Just Lavish gel polish. So I made sure to wipe that off on the dry lint-free pad before I popped it back into my bottle. Otherwise, you are going to contaminate and ruin your colour. So just be conscious of that when you're doing any kind of artwork where you're putting wet colours next to each other and you're using your bottle brush. Just there, you'll see that I come back in with a little bit more of the Mojito Ice. Don't be afraid to add more colour if you need to whilst you're doing your ombre. If at the sides of the nail you've taken too much of the previous colour or the first colour across, you can just come back in and add a little bit more. So on to the third ombre, we're going to be doing the Mojito Ice on the left side, and on the right side I'm going to be coming in with blue Serenity. These two colours were probably the hardest to ombre together because the Mojito Ice is quite light compared to the blue Serenity, but it was still fairly easy to ombre, and I think that's all because of the ombre brush. It makes it effortless, if that makes sense, because the brush is doing a lot of that work for you. But I did spend a little bit more time on this one and a little bit more time taking the Mojito Ice over to the blue Serenity because that's the lighter color. So it was easier to take that over and blend that in rather than taking too much of the blue over into the Mojito Ice. And if you are finding that a particular or two particular colours are a little trickier to blend together, swap from using the light feathery strokes with the tip of the brush and use slightly firmer strokes with the lower part of the brush where those bristles are tightly compact. I found that this really helped with these two colours, so that's why you do see me using more the base end of the ombre brush rather than the tip end on this particular ombre. Now I have to say I really loved these four colours together in the set. I felt as though it was really nice to tie in a few different spring colours, and they all complemented each other so well. And all four of these colours as well have that creamy consistency to them, so they just go together absolutely beautifully. And I also thought it was a great way to show you guys a few of the Kiki London spring colours. But if there are any particular colours you would like to see or any particular designs you would like to see, pop it in the comments below and I'll see what I can do in regards to creating a video with those colours. Now we are moving into the more spring season. It's really fun to get these pastel and brighter colours out again after what has felt like a really long winter. So here you can see, like I said, this one was the trickiest of all the ombres, so I am spending a little bit more time perfecting it, and rather than sticking with that one routine of going up and down the center and then taking each color over to each side, I'm kind of just assessing the ombre as I go along and blending more of each side to get it as perfect as I could. Now that I've finished the second coat of ombres on all three of those nails, I popped them in to cure together for 30 seconds. So that left them a few minutes on each nail for the gel polish to self-level and get out any of those brush strokes. Now over the top of these ombres, I'm going to come in with the matte top coat. I opted to use the matte top coat because I was going to come straight in and paint on the clouds, but I then decided I wanted to add some glitter. So you could skip adding the matte top coat at this point if you wanted to. I personally like to hand paint over a matte surface, so that's why I opted to come in with the matte top coat at this stage, but you could just use the regular top coat if you preferred. The reason I wanted to top coat these before moving on to the next step though was so that if I make any mistakes with my glitter or my nail art, I can simply wipe it off with some alcohol without disturbing or ruining those ombres. And I just find nail art works better over a top coat at times, and just look how gorgeous they looked with that matte top coat over the top of them. Next up, we're going to be adding some glitter onto these nails. Now, I used to be really wary of adding glitter onto gel polish nails because I was really worried that they would end up really bulky, but I've picked up some tips and tricks, so I thought we would add some glitter into the set. Now, to add that glitter, I've popped down some base coat and I've mixed a fine glitter mix into that base coat using my detail brush. Now, I've added a fair amount of base coat. You could also use top coat. Any clear top coat or base coat will work at this step. You want to make sure you're really able to mix that glitter in with your base coat and that there's a fair amount of the base coat compared to the glitter so that it applies nice and smoothly and the glitter doesn't feel gritty. So think of when you have a glitter gel polish, when it goes on, because there's a nice amount of the gel base, the glitter applies nice and smoothly. So that's why I've made sure that I've got enough base coat there to really get that glitter mixed in so that when I'm applying it, it kind of floats on the nail. And to apply the glitter, I'm just using my detail brush. I wanted all the nails to look slightly different, so I haven't followed the same pattern when it comes to applying the glitter. It doesn't have to be perfect. Glitter looks pretty 90% of the time, no matter how you add it to a set of nails. So I'm kind of just going in swirls across the nail in different directions. And I'm kind of feathering it out a little bit because I don't want it to look like a harsh line of glitter going down the nails. I want everything in this design to look quite soft and subtle. And I'm then going to pop that in to cure for 30 seconds. Now, to seal that glitter in, I'm going to come in with a layer of the rubber base coat. I opted to use the rubber base coat rather than the rubber top coat because this is going to leave us with a tacky layer once it has cured so that we can come in with more nail art further on. So I'm applying the rubber base and I'm also going to be sticking some chunkier glitters into this one as well. So that was why I opted to use the rubber base coat rather than the regular base coat because it is that little bit thicker. Now, when you are doing gel polish designs like this, you'll see that we're adding quite a few layers of product. So one of the really important steps is that you keep your layers really thin. So that was why when I was doing the ombre, I was working with really thin layers. Whenever I've come in with a top coat or a base coat, I've made sure to apply it nice and thinly. Even though the rubber base coat is slightly thicker than the regular base coat, you can really work it into the nail with the brush to create a thin layer of product. And here I'm just taking some chunkier glitter pieces and sinking them down into that layer of wet rubber base coat. And this way, when they cure, they'll kind of be sunk down into the rubber base coat, so they won't be sticking up too much, especially when you're using things like stars that have the chunkier edges. But I will show you further along how we make these look super smooth that you wouldn't even know we've encapsulated chunky glitters. Now I will say, obviously, because you are doing a lot of design work and adding lots of layers of product, these will look a little bit more thicker than your regular gel polish sets where you've simply done 2 coats of colour. So I would advise these kind of designs for slightly longer gel polish nails where it doesn't matter too much if you've got a bit more thickness because it doesn't stand out as much. But if you did want to do this on a shorter nail, I would simply skip adding the chunkier glitters and just use the fine glitter. Now that I've added in those chunkier glitter pieces, I'm going to pop these in to cure for 30 seconds. So as you see, we added some stars and some moons because I wanted to go for that super dreamy effect. Now I have got to encapsulate those in. So I'm coming in with a thin layer of the rubber top coat. Again, this is slightly thicker than your regular top coat, but I'm really working it into the nail so that we do only leave a thin layer. But I love this one for encapsulating nail art. So I'm just really running that over the nail, getting right around those chunkier stars, and it will apply slightly bumpy because of those chunkier glitters, but we're going to come in and buff the nails to make them nice and smooth. So don't worry at this step if you're looking at the nails and thinking they look a little bit uneven or lumpy bumpy, because we will fix that further along. Just simply focus on getting a thin layer of the product down. And I like to just take a little bit of the top coat on my brush and brush on a little bit more if it's needed, rather than coming over the entire nail. And I was just showing you guys there, I think I show you again in a moment as well, they don't look as uneven and as bumpy as you might think. So here you'll see, just look how smooth they look. And the rubber top coat does require a 60-second cure, so I popped that in to cure for 60 seconds. Now I'm going to take the Kiki London buffer and we're going to use the 100 grit side of it to buff the entire nail. Now I'm buffing over the entire nail, but I'm checking it from all angles and then focusing on any of the areas that feel more bumpy than the others. You will find sometimes as well, like I found here with the silver stars, they were a lot thicker than the iridescent stars I used. So I did file into them a little bit if there was edges of the star sticking up, but it didn't matter too much for the type of design I was doing. And then I'm going to come in and use the 180 grit side of the nail file just to sharpen this up a little bit. We've kind of lost the shape a tiny bit where we've been adding the layers of product. So I'm just going to run it along to reshape the nail. And this step will really help with the overall finished appearance of the nail and stop them from looking too bulky. So this is what the nails look like. I've done that on the other two nails off camera. I'm then going to take one of the Kiki London alcohol pads and really cleanse away all of that dust that's from filing. And I did also want to say that when I was filing the shape, I only opted to use the 180 grit side of the nail file because remember we're working with gel polish and that files really easily and you don't want to file into it too much. So that's why I've just used the 180 grit side. Then I'm going to take some of the French white and pop that down on my palette, and I'm going to come back in with that 01 detail brush to draw on our clouds. So all I'm simply doing is I want these clouds to look quite realistic. Now when you look at cloud nails on Instagram or Pinterest, you're going to see so many different types. Some of them have the classic more cartoon hand-drawn effect clouds, and then some of them do look more realistic, and I wanted these to look really soft like big white fluffy clouds. So I went for that style more than creating really crisp, perfect looking clouds. And obviously that way it is a little bit easier to do as well if you're a beginner when it comes to hand painting. Now when I'm painting on these clouds, I'm just focusing on creating the top shape of the cloud, so that bumpy effect. And then I'm blending the colour down at the bottom. I don't want there to be a crisp straight or crisp sharp line down at the bottom. I want the gel polish to fade out and kind of look a little bit translucent. So to do that, I'm wiping my brush onto one of the alcohol pads and then blending out the colour, but I kind of felt as though it wasn't blending as much as I wanted it to. So what I opted to do was pop some alcohol in a little palette, and then I'm just going to run my brush into it, dab off some of the excess, and then blend out the bottom of that cloud a little bit more. This really helped to give it that more realistic effect, if that makes sense. I just wanted it to look a little bit more translucent and fade out rather than having a harsh bottom finish to the design. So I then popped that in to cure for 60 seconds, and I'm going to speed through and do exactly the same on the next nail. So just creating that bumpy edge to the top of the cloud and then filling it in with some gel polish. Just really keeping it nice and smooth. You don't want to add too much product. You want to keep the layer thin. Don't worry if it doesn't look too pigmented or if it looks a little bit opaque, because we're going to come in and highlight the top of the cloud with a second coat anyway. So we're just getting this rough shape down to begin with the first coat of colour. And on some nails, I just opted to add on 2 clouds, and on others, I went for 3. I kind of was trying to think about where I was placing the clouds so that it kind of flowed as we looked across all 3 nails. And also do bear in mind where you're popping them down if you've put glitters down. I did make the mistake on one of the nails and popped a cloud over one of the glitter stars, and it just completely covered it. So do bear that in mind. I then did the clouds on the first nail off camera just because it was exactly the same as the previous 2 nails and I didn't want the video to be too repetitive. But now we're going to move on to highlighting the tops of those clouds. So I was kind of picturing, you know, when you've got the clouds in the sky and the sun is shining down on them, and the tops of the clouds just look that little bit brighter. So that's the effect I was going for here. I'm just coming over the top of them with some more of that French white gel polish, blending it down slightly, but I don't want to come over the areas where we blended out the gel polish with the alcohol because I liked how soft and translucent that part of the cloud looked. So I'm simply just going over the tops of the cloud, sorry. Now here as well, it's a great opportunity if you wasn't very happy with how neat the tops of the clouds were from the first coat, you can kind of come in and create the shape a little bit better, neaten up any of the points of the clouds and just get it all a little bit neater. So that's what I'm doing as well, and the detail brush is fab for this because it has those short bristles. You're able to get a nice neat line with them and create really intricate shapes. Even though the clouds are fairly simple to do, you're just able to get a nice neat application with the gel polish. Because those bristles are shorter, you've got more control over the product and where you're applying it. Now I'm just going to speed through and do exactly the same on the next two nails. So just highlighting the tops of the clouds. You really don't need a lot of product on your brush for this step, and you kind of want to make sure you're applying it nice and smooth as well. When you're doing nail art with gel polish, it can be a little tricky at times when you're drawing different designs on, working with your brush in different ways. It can kind of get a little tricky to apply the product smoothly. So I like to get the shape down and then come over it a little bit just to make sure the gel polish has a nice even layer. Now that we've finished the cloud nails, I've cured them, I'm going to pop them aside because all that needs to be done to them is to top coat, which we're going to do at the end of the video. So we're going to work on the thumb and the ring finger. Now, if you remember on the pointer finger, we used Spring Fling as the first half of the ombre. So I want the thumb to be completely Spring Fling. And then if you remember on the ring finger, the right side of the ombre was the blue Serenity. So I want the little finger to be the blue Serenity. So when we put all of the nails together, the colours kind of flow across the set, if that makes sense. You'll see once they are all put together. But I've done a first coat of both of those colours and I've popped them into cure for 30 seconds. And at this point, I was looking at these two colours together and thought, oh my God, they matched each other perfectly if you wanted to do gender reveal nails. The two colours just really complemented each other for a blue and a pink. Loved them in a set together. Now I'm coming in and just applying that thin second coat of colour. This is where you really see the pigmentation of these two colours come together and they really pop. I'm loving these creamy shades at the moment. They just look so dreamy and they create absolutely beautiful spring nails. Now I'm going to be doing some simple glitter fades on these two nails. So I'm going to take the Kiki London round brush to do that. And I'm going to be using that same glitter mix that we made earlier for the background for our cloud nails. So I'm simply mixing it together a little bit more because that glitter will have settled to the bottom of the base coat. So I'm just making sure it's all mixed together. And then I'm picking it up and applying it down at the cuticle area and just fading it down the nail. Now the round brush is absolutely amazing for doing glitter fades because not only is it large enough though that you can pick up a generous amount of your glitter and base coat, because it has that round tip, when you're working on yourself or a client, it's amazing for getting a neat cuticle application. I absolutely love that about this brush because as you can see here, I'm kind of pushing it up to the cuticle area and I'm able to just swirl that glitter off of my brush and pull it down the nail. And it's a little hard to explain obviously on a press-on nail tip, but if you picture when you are working in a cuticle area, a lot of the time it's rounded. So having a round tip brush just makes it a whole lot easier. So I've just faded that glitter out down towards the tip. I'm coming in and just tapping on any extra glitter where I want it to be, but I want it to be most opaque up at the cuticle area. And then as we get down to the tip, we end up with no glitter as it's faded out. So here is what the nails look like when I've put them all together. So I was just pointing out how the colours flow across each other. I thought they looked so pretty. So now all that's left to do is top coat. So I'm going to be using the No White rubber top coat as well as the No White matte top coat. I want the cloud nails to be matte. I loved how those ombres looked when they were matte, so I decided we'd go for an overall matte finish on those two nails. But on the glitter fades, I wanted there to be that little bit of shiny sparkle, so that's why I opted to go with a glossy top coat for those ones. And I opted to use the rubber top coat because obviously where we have got that layer of glitter, it might be a little bit bumpy, so applying the rubber top coat leaves you with a super smooth nail. So when I'm coming to apply my top coat, I'm applying a nice thin layer. The top coat is there to simply protect and seal in your colours and your nail art. So I'm making sure that it's just a thin coat, and I'm also making sure to cap around the free edge, especially if you're doing a set on yourself or a client or working on the natural nail. Capping that free edge really helps protect the colour from any chipping. And then once I have applied the top coat, I'll pop these in to cure for 60 seconds. The matte top coat does only require a 30-second cure, but the rubber top coat requires a 60-second cure. So it's easier to just pop them all in to cure for 60 seconds. And then that, guys, is the end of the video. I really hope you liked this design. I thought it looked super pretty and it's fairly easy to recreate. So if you do have a go at recreating, please don't forget to tag us so that we can see. This is what the finished result looked like. If you did enjoy watching, then please give the video a thumbs up and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, and then I'll see you all again in next Friday's video. Lots of love. Take care. Bye bye.